Welcome to Loaded and Rolling. I'm your host, Thomas Wasson. Now, it is getting colder. I normally have my official FreightWaves swag on, but those of you who are listening to this podcast and cannot see it, it is vest time, bringing back out the vest. But speaking of vests and VCs and companies, super excited, going to be bringing on shortly a startup that I'm very familiar with. I used to be a part of it, aifleet, and there's some really cool stuff going on, especially in the technology space. So one of the folks we're going to be talking to in just a minute is going to be Mr. Mike Stevens, recently hired as the Chief Financial Officer at aifleet, and going to pick his brain also not only about the company, the raise, the round, but his experiences, because it's not every day you get finance people from large trucking companies to talk about finance and trucking as well, especially when they're publicly traded. They don't want to talk to me. Something about investors. Who knows what that is? But anyways, let's bring in our guest. Let's bring in Mike. Mike, welcome, sir. Pleasure to have you on the show. Congratulations on the new role as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys.
And I came from operations, so the finance stuff we're not always the best at controlling cost when you deadhead your trucks 500 miles. But tell us a little bit about your experience before joining aifleet, and tell us a little about the finance world, especially in trucking.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's interesting. Once you get into trucking, it's hard to get out. You hear that all the time. But yeah, I got into trucking probably 12 years ago. Was working for Swift Transportation. Came up through their finance department. Was managing the finance department there through the Swift Knight merger. I did all the modeling for the Swift side of that transaction. So it was a great experience to, interact with Knight. Those guys do a great job, and great operators. Was lucky to be on one of the transition teams during that merger, and so that was a really neat experience. Left there in 2017. Went to USA Truck. Our VP of Finance, Jason Bates at Swift, had been named the CFO at USA Truck. And while we were at Swift, we'd built a very robust P&L rolling forecast process that Jason wanted to emulate when he got to USA Truck. So went out there, was there for about the last 6 years. Great experience. That was back in 2017, USA Truck was probably the laughing stock of the public transports, quite honestly. I think we were trading under $4 a share. They'd gone through 5 CEOs in 5 years, and it was really in a less than ideal situation. So to be part of that, turnaround, was a great experience. We'd sold to DB Schenker about a year ago. And last 3 years there, I was the SVP of Finance, Strategy, and Investor Relations. So a lot of great experiences and stories from my time there.
I feel like I came from U.S. Express, so that $4 a share, I'd be jealous. I think U.S. Express share price at the time of purchase was pretty low. When we did disclosures, I had to disclose I had 5 shares as a practical joke, and then I had to sell them. So I'm free now. I can talk about anything. But coming from Knight Swift to USA Truck, I am curious, was there, in the world of trucking finance, is there a similar agreed-upon way of measuring the P&L and how you deploy your assets, or does every trucking company kind of have their own unique way of how we're going to handle this money? Because in trucking, margins are very thin.
Yes, this is we like to say this is a very thin margin business, no doubt about it. It's actually a great question, and largely I would say the majority of carriers, construct their P&L very similar, and they look at similar metrics. Revenue per truck per week or per day, being made up of utilization and rate. Checking the deadhead. Those are they're your main metrics. So most people look at that. Now they may what they put into each of those buckets may be a little different here or there, how they measure the KPI, but largely very similar.
I always felt like whenever, especially like an investor relations standpoint, you're looking at truck counts and the earnings, working tractor was always the fun little secret of how many tractors do you really have? Because if you ever told them that versus your total truck count or how many are in the shop, I always felt like from a finance perspective, that had to be frustrating because you're thinking, well, if I'm using this many trucks and I expected this much revenue, but wait, like 10% of you are not making any revenue? Like, how do you put that in the forecast?
Yeah, that's always a tricky number how you count those trucks, but you're paying for them all. So you definitely want to run them for sure.
So let's talk about joining aifleet. Really fun company. I'm a little biased because I did come over there, so no pressure. But it's super fun because watching startups grow. A recent funding round as well. Tell us the process. How did you discover it, and what made you kind of want to go from some of the largest trucking carriers to one that is taking flight?
Yeah, no, great question. I left USA Truck about 3 months after the merger with DB Schenker, and thought I was going to take a few months off, and I had a lot of inquiries on people that were interested in hiring me, but I really wanted to find the right fit for me, and when I learned about and you're familiar with Mark, I learned what he was trying to accomplish using artificial intelligence. It really resonated with me. I didn't think I'd ever come to a trucking carrier that was probably this small. We're about 150 trucks right now. But what he was trying to do, when he was explaining what he was trying to accomplish, it was literally something I said needed to happen a few years back. He's really trying to solve utilization by maximizing the usage of driver hours in the clock. So they basically have built a homegrown TMS platform that uses artificial intelligence to take the freight basket, look at driver behaviors, as far as breaks, sleep patterns, home time, and it uses this planning tool to plan them. We call it home to home, so the driver knows where he's going to be for the whole week. And by doing this, they're creating superior utilization. We're getting well over 2,000 miles per truck per week.
That's amazing, because it felt like, even looking at revenue per truck per week and revenue miles per truck per week, a lot of those larger fleets, you're constrained by the customer. You're almost beholden to their network, and then your drivers are stuck fitting a square peg in a round hole. Is that kind of one of the unique things where this model, obviously you always need customers, but it's more tailored towards a driver up approach instead of this top down drivers as chicken or the egg, I guess?
Yeah, no, I'd say that's definitely true. That's definitely, yeah, I'd agree with you.
Looking into startup world as well, coming publicly traded, working on mergers and acquisitions. What were some of the thoughts coming in to the very other side? I just did this $14 million raise, of course. Is that something that, from a finance perspective, does anything change, or is there anything you need to take into consideration? Or whenever it's like a startup, the goal is just growth and try to maximize, as much revenue and keep scaling? Because I know with a traditional startup model prior to the higher interest rates, you would just get tons of money, you throw it at it, you grow, and then later you're like, hey, how much am I actually making? Like we've seen with Flexports and Convoys and stuff. Are there any changes as you approach the finance aspect and the strategy behind this growth?
Yeah, I came from the public world, definitely quarterly reporting, dealing with, sell side analysts and investors. And so this is, a new foray into the venture capital world, which is a little different, quite honestly. It's taken a little bit of adjustment. When you're in publics, you're worried about profitability by quarter, and that's really all that matters, and you want to grow, but you have that quarterly stress. These guys are really trying to build something different. And what's really kind of unique is I think everybody in the industry is trying to solve utilization and becoming, better at it. I mean, all the big players that I've been associated with and have interacted with, most of the other big players, they're all trying to do that. But it's hard when you have all these legacy systems that you're trying to, put new stuff on top of. A lot of the carriers are current size. It's just they don't have the resources or the really thinking out like, hey, we want to bring in artificial intelligence. It's a little intimidating at times. So we are positioned in such a unique spot where, yes, we need a path to profitability, and currently we're not there yet, but we have a good trajectory towards it. And the underlying theme of what we're trying to accomplish, i.e., utilizing the clock better for better asset utilization, is a home run. The technology is, I wish people could see it. It's really phenomenal how it does at planning loads. Now we need to continue to, uptick our freight basket, or, our customers. Obviously the market is less than ideal right now. And, we have an opportunity to continue to get better on our cost structure, which is really why they brought me in, to help them, work with vendor relations, get the equipment in the right spot, and really drive to where we need to be.
I think that was one cool thing, especially in the startup world, as I learned, when you first get invested, a lot of baskets, folks are investing in all these small companies. But from your traditional tech startups, even your TMS spaces, they're not actually doing things, they're making a product to sell to others. aifleet's one of the unique trucking companies that it is a tech startup that has trucks to test the product. So I can only assume from an investor relations standpoint, as well as working with VCs and working on these rounds, planning these next series runs and stuff, you have ace in the hole because you can actually say, well, look, we're making money and we know there's a product fit because we're making this fit. Check out the data. It's got to be an easier sell compared to other situations where maybe you're doing investor relations at a large firm or you're trying to get it where you're convincing folks, hey, when we do this, we're expecting this.
Yeah, it's kind of a unique space Mark went after because obviously we consider us a technology enhanced company, which a lot of trucking companies say that. This truly is, and you know understand that from your background here. They've got most of their they've got all their rounds from true venture capitalists that are used to that technology. They're always a little nervous, to be an asset-based carrier. That being said, Mark and I have been here we're in Austin. MCAE is here this week. We've been meeting with quite a few vendors and people. What's interesting is, we're going to target another round of financing probably early next year. And the fun thing is that we now have industry people that are coming to us saying, hey, we hear about what you're doing. Tell us about your technology. Like, you're really doing that. And they're like, hey, we may be interested in investing in this. Like, this is groundbreaking stuff. So I think it's been enjoyable for Mark to, starting to see that the industry is really respecting what he's doing and wants to back it.
That's really good. Congratulations as well for MCA. I'm still trying to get a press pass, but I made fun of the driver shortage, so they're probably not going to give me one. So maybe next year. We got Alan Adler we're sending down there. That's always the fun part working in media. It depends on how you can get your press passes. But looking at especially getting more buzz and stuff in the next steps, once you traditionally, and how I've always interpreted it is, I guess most trucking companies find a shipper. They try to route themselves to one specific thing and find a load to get back. When you have technology that can go through millions of loads and OD pairs and cycle through it in like 60 seconds, what becomes the strategy? You just need to fill the bucket more? Would you rather scale the truck count? Is it kind of like a stair step? Because I'm always curious. Your traditional one would be like, all right, 5 loads per week. I need like 5 trucks or however much, and then slowly scale.
Yeah. So what they've done to this point, and I think we're going to change this a little bit going forward, but they've largely aggregated a bunch of freight boards to create their own freight basket. And so, in some markets that's great. Obviously, in this market, it's less than ideal, just with depressed spot market pricing. So what we want to do is start. We have about 10% of our freight right now is contractual, direct from shipper. So we would like to move that to probably around 40% by the end of next year, probably 75% by the end of 25. To enhance that. But we'll always have a spot board component because that's what helps us drive that utilization. But as we fill that freight basket with, direct to shipper freight, we'll have to be aware of servicing that correctly.
I was going to say the timing's interesting because a lot of these direct to shipper load boards are getting more available with APIs. It used to be, I felt like back when I was an analyst 5-6 years ago, it was still very stratified. So it kind of opens the door. As long as you can get access from the shipper or the broker and be able to request the loads, then it still works for the new scheme compared to like, I'm stuck at this RFP. I don't really like this lane. Now I got to wait a year.
Yeah, I mean, there is that benefit, but you're giving up margin. Just use these spot board loads, and we need to, that's the one way to improve our performance is to get a little more contract freight in here.
Looking in the market conditions and stuff, tell us about the funding round and the $14 million raise. I know, especially from what I've heard anecdotally, it's been for companies that aren't actually making profit and stuff. The burn rate, and you just burn a bunch. It's been more difficult because interest rates. I heard some folks would rather park their funds in T-bills instead of investing in startups because of it. Tell us how the raise came about and what's going to be some of the goals with this new injection, about 14 mil.
Sure. I wasn't a part of that round. The market secured it, but I've obviously been briefed on it. And it's definitely changed from when he started a few years ago. The VC market's got a lot tighter. You're absolutely correct with interest rates going up. It's a lot of people are getting a lot more conservative with capital. But that being said, the technology that they put together does speak for itself. And so a lot of the financing was coming from some of the original investors. There's some people that came in new that just want to be a part of it. But yeah, we're basically wanting to use it to continue to enhance the TMS. I mean, that really is the bread and butter of this company. So we're going to continue improvements there. We want to use the capital to help us right our cost structure to drive more profitability, and we definitely have the path to get there. So we're very excited.
And questions regarding, I know you came from two large fleets, so a little bit of a left field question on how trucks are purchased. Because I remember back at the old US Express, you'd either lease them or buy them, and every 2 or 3 years you try to sell them, but you could depreciate them. I always wondered, coming from when you're looking to grow your truck count, did large fleets typically just buy their own assets, or even coming to a smaller company, do you want to try to lease them in this environment, dealing with that aspect of financial, CapEx?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and everybody does it a little different, and it gets different year to year. I don't know that there's a right or wrong, depending on where interest rates are, what you can get for your lease rates, what type of lease you want to do. Traditionally, Mark put this together largely with full service type leases, which are very advantageous for where to start that up. As we go into next year, we're planning a growth of somewhere to 50 to 60% in truck count growth, which is a lot less than he's actually done and a lot less than he would like to do. But in this market, we want to be a little more conservative. That being said, we're looking at all options as far as working, potentially full service lease, but also looking at maybe just leasing directly from the OEMs through the dealership network.
That's what I was curious about as well, because trailers and tractors, anecdotally you read about ACT Research, FTR, build rates and orders are improving. So, getting the access to the assets is becoming easier. But I always wondered if it'd be a trap, kind of like how you'd buy a car. If it's like, well, given how rates are, maybe it's more advantageous to have that full service lease and then just bring it in and swap it. Or if it ever becomes a time where it's like, let me buy these assets and have them on the books, but then you have to deal with them if you don't need them. So I was curious, when you're looking to double, it's hard for trucking companies to grow, especially in any kind of environment. Those are questions that keep me up at night.
Yeah, well, it's a lot depends on just the trucking company, what they're hauling, what their shop network is. All those factors go into that. At the end of the day, the large carriers, which is my background, either get their own equipment through a purchase or a lease, but it's still their equipment on their books, and they have shops that they run it through, and so that's where we're going to try to get to. It's what I've been involved with. I have great relationships with a lot of the OEMs, and so I really want to go to that type of network.
If you're a large enough size, do OEMs give build priorities based on size or when you put in the order? I always wondered if it was something where you put in a Daimler for some Cascadias and you put in like 2,000 orders. Are they going to prioritize based on the total order count, or if it's like the time you put your reservation in?
Yeah, every OEM does it different, and I think I got to be careful what I say here. We learned a lot about the OEMs through the COVID process. Obviously, when all that, you're talking about the build slots being so hard to get the last couple of years, which is absolutely the case. So we dealt with that a lot at USA Truck. A lot of my time was spent, trying to solve those issues. And every OEM allocates slots different. So, what Navistar does is what Daimler does, is what Kenworth does. During COVID, it was difficult because a lot of orders got canceled on carriers that we were expecting trucks. And so, how in this new world, it is softening. I've met with, especially Navistar and Daimler. So, we anticipate to be able to get the slots we need to, which is good. It's good for carriers. I mean, one of the big things I did at USA Truck, we did a lot of analysis on age of the fleet, and you look at how much a truck costs you, year 1 to year 2 to year 3 to year 4 to year 5, and it gets very expensive to run, an older truck. We actually moved from a 5-year trade cycle to a 4-year trade cycle just based on the analysis that it was better to turn those trucks sooner. And there's carriers that are doing it in 37 months, and so it just depends on what your strategy is. Those later years get very expensive. Obviously, the maintenance goes up, a hockey stick, but you also have downtime in the shop. Your average brand new truck, you're in the shop 2 to 3 days a year. A 5-year-old truck could be in the shop, 20 to 25 days a year. So that's a lot of loss of production. You get increased fuel. I mean, every year it seems like trucks get 1 to 2 or 0.1 better on MPG. So you just want to continue to refresh the fleet. Sorry.
Yeah, and looking at fuel prices as well, coming from a large fleet that has fuel surcharges to a smaller fleet that is working on access, is there as large of an impact? Is it a mitigatable strategy, or is the real goal being I just need to get access to freight with a fuel surcharge to cover the difference? Because we hear that a lot. We know it impacts them more, but how big of a thing is it when you're looking at the numbers?
It's a big. I mean, that really is it's a great comment. And where AI fleets largely dependent on the spot market currently, these increasing fuel rates. I mean, you could say the fuel's in there, and yes, it is, but it's not like a traditional fuel surcharge program. Most large fuel surcharge programs for the large retailers really do cover the cost of the fluctuations. Like you lose a little bit up and down just within the week, but over the course of time, the increases and decreases really are covered by the surcharge. That's not the case always with, these smaller carriers that are dependent on spot market freight. So in this high fuel prices environment that we are now, and probably will be for a while with, you see what's going around in Israel and everything else, I don't know that any of us think that fuel is going to go down anytime soon. Yeah, we do have to have a strategy around that.
And I like the comments about especially fuel and maintenance being two of the big ones. Driver wages. AI Fleet has a very unique pay structure. There's like a revenue share almost, a bonus style, or there's a pay. Tell us a little bit about that, because typically trucking companies prefer the cost per mile, because even though it may harm the driver, that's another variable cost that I don't have to pay them. Just give them $50 layover or something.
Yeah, and we've changed it up a little bit the last little bit, moving more towards a traditional CPM basis, where we have a very good turnover rate. Our turnover is less than 30%. Drivers love driving here. They really do. And the big reason is they get miles. Like I said, we're running over 2,000 miles per truck per week. So, their take-home W-2 pay is very good here compared to other carriers, because we're getting the miles.
I do like that, because that was one of the biggest issues I ran into was when we talked about owner-operators and lease purchases joining a large carrier, you're mostly beholden to their network. So you may be stuck in an 1,800-mile-a-week network, and it's no fault of your own. It's just the nature of the design of the network. Looking at how, especially the technology from a finance standpoint, a lot of companies, it feels like change management, get rid of legacy systems, the tech debt, 50-50 odds it even gets adopted. I saw that at US Express, so that's my own bias. When you're developing it from the ground up, how do companies typically view that? Does that become a cornerstone for a trucking tech startup, or is it eventually the goal to turn it into like a profit center, if that makes any sense?
Great question, and we actually been asked that question quite a bit at MCE. It's like, is this something we may eventually license or sell, and really what we're saying is that's TBD. When Mark developed this concept, and we have an amazing CTO. Actually, a lot of our engineers are based in Hungary. They do a great job with the system. It's really Mark made a decision that, like you said, a lot of trucking companies do not implement software all that well. So they really believed in their concept. It's been proven out that it absolutely works. So he decided to build a company around it. And as that develops and evolves, we'll see what happens. We could see scenarios where we just continue to grow truck count and get bigger and bigger and drive to profitability that way. We can also see some scenarios where, we may get into some licensing agreements, and we'll just see how that goes.
It's fascinating. A great early story of when I helped out at AI Fleet in their pre-seed was that we were trying to find carriers to partner up, and we would go down the list like a broker and call MC numbers and say, we will pay you $6,000 a week to give us one truck and let us test this software. Every single person said, oh, I can just do better. And it turns out when we shared the data, they could not do better, but that concept, kind of tying up to how you're going to change the market. It feels like that's the biggest challenge right now, is because trucking is almost still stuck in this very analog way of doing things, and the technology almost feels too good to be true for a lot of these operators.
It is. It almost makes me uncomfortable telling people. I was like, this is really amazing stuff. So I 100% agree with you and get where you're coming from. It's what I said earlier. There are some great technology innovators in our industry, and some large carriers are really doing some very cool things. I know some of the guys over Werner, they're putting together some cool stuff. It's hard when they're that large to turn it that quick. And like I said earlier, a lot of the majority of our industry, no one debates this is the most fragmented industry there is. Look at Knight Swift, they're 1% of the industry, and they're infinitely bigger than anybody else. So it's very fragmented, and a lot of these small carriers just that you can't do it. So I love the position we're in. I'm super grateful for Mark for giving me this opportunity because I really believe we're going to grow into something great.
I'm excited to watch as it develops. Got about 30 seconds left here. Folks want to reach out to you or learn more about AI Fleet, partner up, get more information. What's the best way to find out?
Yeah, just shoot me an email. It's mike.stevens@aifleet.com. And yeah, we'd love to partner or share with anything.
Perfect. Mike, thanks so much for your time. Congratulations again. Have fun at MCA. If you see Alan Adler, he's one of our folks. He may have a little press jacket on. Give him a wave for me and tell him I'm jealous that Daimler flew him out to Germany.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank y'all so much. Check AI Fleet out. I think it's aifleet.co or aifleet.com. You can see we've reported on them as well. Grace Sharkey recently has an article about the $14 million raise. Good stuff going on over there. Excited to see how it goes. That's going to be a wrap for this podcast. But if you're just joining us, Apple and Spotify or our YouTube page, youtube.com/FreightWaves. Loaded and Rolling is under there. Sign up for the newsletter while you're at it, FreightWaves.com/Loaded and Rolling. If I say Loaded and Rolling one more time, Beetlejuice comes out. Join us next week, though. Going to be having a lot more content coming up 1 p.m. Eastern. Next Tuesday, we'll do it live.